Okay, why don't we get started? Welcome everyone. I'm Lisa Campo-Engelstein. I'm the director of the Institute for the Medical Humanities. And I'm so delighted that you're joining us here for another one of our fabulous IMH seminars. I also want to let you know that these are continuing for the spring term, the second and fourth Thursday of the month at noon. Our schedule is on our website. Check out all the great people we're bringing in and our own faculty who are going to be giving talks. So please mark your calendars now. So I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for today. Dr. Brett Derbes received his PhD in American History from Auburn University in 2018. He is the Director of Research and Managing Editor for the Texas State Historical Association. In this role, he oversees all aspects of the online handbook for the Handbook of Texas. Dr. Heather Wooten, many of you know and love. She's an adjunct assistant professor here at the IMH and teaches courses in the history of medicine. And she is a project director for the Handbook of Texas Medicine. I'm going to turn it over to our two speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you everyone for attending this. So we were very excited to share this project with you. And we hope it's going to heighten your interest in participating in the project in a variety of ways, of which we will tell you about later on. But I think I'll first tell you how we're going to, what the format is for this presentation. And that is, first, I will spend a little time telling you what the handbook is, how it came into being, and then the significance of it, especially to those in the healthcare field. And then after that, Dr. Derbes is going to demonstrate to you how you can access the handbook, how you can utilize its contents, and I can almost assure you, you're going to have a wonderful time exploring once you get into it. And then we also have with us today two IMH graduate students who have written, researched, or in the process of, or have already researched and written entries for the handbook, and neither of them have a history background, so to speak, but they're going to share with you their perspectives and the value of writing for the handbook for those of you here on the UTMB campus. And then finally, please feel free to use the Q&A piece of, portion of this, the Q&A box down below, or the chat box. And after Carissa and Margarita have shared with you, we can certainly delve into some of your comments and questions and answer those as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share with you my screen and my PowerPoint here. See, let me pull it over just a little bit so I can. All right. So in one way, this project has roots that actually extend back 80 years to the late 1930s. It was the brainchild of Walter Prescott Webb, who is considered to be one of Texas's most significant and influential scholars. Dr. Webb spent a career as a prominent member of the history faculty at UT Austin, and also served as director of the Texas State Historical Association. He was a powerful thinker who really devoted his career to the study of history as a guide for the future. And so one of his primary vehicles was to do this was he spearheaded the creation of a definitive encyclopedia of the history of the state, which is the Handbook of Texas. And some of you are already familiar with that. You might have researched it in projects of your own. Your children might have used it in school. But to paraphrase this quote here that was provided by Dr. Webb in 1939 for the Southwestern Historical Quarterly. This was his vision of what he wanted the Handbook of Texas to be. He wanted it to be indispensable to anyone who is looking for historical facts or information pertaining to Texas. If you are doing that, the Handbook of Texas would be where you want to start. And so his idea of entries into this handbook would be incredibly strong and solid. Those entries would adhere to the utmost scholarly standards of the history profession. They would be fully documented, and they would go through a thorough review process before going online. So it would be a very sophisticated and respectable research tool. So beginning in 1939, when Webb proposed his vision for the handbook, he compiled this team of writers composed of academics, graduate students, independent historians who became engaged in building this first handbook. And so the product of that endeavor, that first initial endeavor, came out in 1952, when you had the Handbook of Texas was a 2-volume set. And then over the years, you had a supplemental volumes, one in 1976. But then in 1983, the handbook had become so popular that TSHA engaged in this full-throated expansion project, and whereby scholars were assigned to oversee the building of entry collections within the handbook that addressed specific historical genres. So in history of indigenous people in Texas, military history, Latino history, the history of Texas music. And of course, medicine was one of those categories. And the individual who led that first effort in 1983 was really one of our own here at UTMB. And that was Dr. Chester Burns, who was the James Wade Rockwell Professor of the History of Medicine. Here, he was one of the founders of the Institute for Medical Humanities and was a longtime member of our faculty. But as we are all very dedicated to certain professional organizations, Chester Burns was dedicated to the TSHA. And in fact, those of you who are familiar with the Centennial History, that mammoth volume that he wrote of UTMB, take a look at where that was, who published that. That was TSHA Press published the Centennial History. So Dr. Burns is credited with building this group of scholars to create this collection of history of medicine entries into that traditional handbook over a period of about 13 years. Burns himself published 45 entries, and most of those highlighted the early history of UTMB. But he also, sent out, other individuals to explore a vast array of topics pertaining to history, medical history in Texas. So as time went on, this project is by 1996, you have enough material to have the 6-volume set that was published. And then shortly after that, the handbook was so popular, it continued to grow. TSHA didn't see the feasibility of creating another full volume set. So they just decided to put it online, the encyclopedia online. And that was an incredibly strategic decision, in that they thought, we will not only put it online, but importantly, we're going to make it freely accessible, free of charge to anyone who wants to access it. So today, it is a mammoth encyclopedia. As you can see here in this diagram, there are now over 27,000 entries in the General Handbook of Texas. It's a phenomenal amount, and it also incorporates over 6,000 authors, has over 8,000 images, you had videos and audio clips. So of that number you see there, of the 27,000 entries, building on the effort that Chester Burns first began, there are now 650 entries dedicated only solely to the history of medicine in Texas. So who uses the General Handbook? and I would say just about anybody. It has an immensely diverse viewership across the state, the nation, and the world. It provides content for lesson plans and projects, for publications and research. Multiple online sources, including Wikipedia, use it as a reference tool. And to give you an idea of the scope per year is for fiscal year ending in 2019 and 2020, the General Handbook had over 3 million users, meaning those who resource the handbook more than once, and actually over 7 million page views. So have a little typo there. There's 7 million page views. So late in the 1990s, TSHA began to create these spin-offs of the General Handbook that reflect particular content genres, and those were called special projects. And as you can see here on this slide, over a 20-year period, 6 of those were created. And each of these spin-offs contains close to 1,000 or more entries in them, and they are still growing. And then also the publication of at least one ebook consisting of entries devoted to a particular direction. So, for instance, very recently, the Handbook of Texas Women published an ebook that addressed the women's suffrage movement in Texas. So the 7th of this series of spin-offs is now the Handbook of Texas Medicine. And we're incredibly excited about it. It is this new building block of the Handbook of Texas. It is unique in the fact that it is the first state-based medical encyclopedia in the United States. And with this project, Texas will be the only state in the nation to chronicle its history and contributions in the field of medicine to this depth. And as project director, I lead a team of over 20 professional scholars who represent diverse regions and specialties throughout the state. And those 20 professional scholars are known as the Executive Advisory Committee. And their primary goal is primary purpose is for content generation, meaning coming up with new topics to add to the handbook, the writing of entries themselves, or to supervise the writing of entries by students and other individuals. So, by looking at this, what the goal of this will be is that our hope for this Handbook of Texas Medicine is to expand the current 650 entries to over 1,000. And the list, as you see here, gives you a general idea of the breadth of this endeavor. It is not just your traditional physicians or certain medical institutions. That is definitely part of it, but it's a wide array of topics and directions of which you can which will make good entries into this handbook. And actually, we're already on our way. We already have 250 topics, additional topics that have been identified, and we have already over 100 new entries that have been published or are in the pipeline. Here are some recent examples. Some of these may be very familiar to you. You have the bubonic plague in Galveston that was written by Dr. Paula Summerly here at UTMB, and she also is the author of a piece on Dr. Anna Bowie. We have a graduate student here at the IMH who published on Dax Cowart, and another one, Carissa Rakestraw, who published on James Harlan Steele. You can also see we have the Galveston National Laboratory. There is already an entry on that. as is the brain collection at UT Houston, which is UT Austin, which is a wonderful entry as well. Edith May Irby Jones, just for your information, was the first African-American to attend racially mixed classes in the American South, and was the first African-American to graduate from a Southern medical school. That was the University of Arkansas, but she practiced in Houston's 3rd Ward and also served on the faculty of Baylor Medical School and also UT Houston. So before I hand the talk over to Brett, I wanted to address one important piece, which is what is the significance of this project beyond building an encyclopedia that has a lot of entries about the history of medicine in Texas? What else can it do? How can it serve the healthcare community? And there were three answers I personally had to that. And one of them is that it provides context, because by integrating the humanities with the hard sciences, the handbook entries can provide this lens that enables the understanding of the historical relevance and the future implications of health experiences and practices. So for instance, in response to the COVID outbreak, TSHA and the Handbook of Texas Medicine project collaborated together to release a free to download ebook that was, of which its content was derived from entries that shed light on the ways that the medical and lay communities in Texas responded to epidemics of the past. And by doing that, also to highlight, lessons learned, both clinically and in terms of public health efforts. Another idea was in terms of public health education, because the handbook helps to inform the public to alternative methods and also treatments and the roles that they play historically and their legacies. So anything from herbal healing gardens to vaccines, the allegiance of curanderism within the traditional Latino communities, the battle against medical quackery. All of those have entries or have upcoming entries, and they all play a role in helping us understand how to address the public health today and also that of the future. And then finally, when you're speaking of the future, it's also the idea of building, this handbook will help build diversity within the healthcare workforce. Because what it does is the entries help provide role models and examples of multicultural and diverse healthcare practices and practitioners and researchers. So K through 12 students and even beyond today and tomorrow are given a look at what all is possible, what directions they possibly could go with their life direction that would contribute to the healthcare communities of tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Derbes, and he is going to show you how to access the handbook, how to explore it, and also think of ways of which hopefully you would like to participate.
Thank you so much, Heather. I appreciate that that overview of the history of the handbook, and you've done an excellent job of describing where we've been and where we're headed. And I appreciate everyone here who's attending. I see we have quite a few people here today, and so I appreciate your time, and I'm excited to be here. This project is it's close to my heart. My father is a recently retired MD, and his father was a pharmacist, and his father was a pharmacist, and my sister is supervisor in a hospital laboratory. And I am the son who started playing drums and played in all the rock bands and wandered around and eventually found my way to being a historian. And so through that path, I became Dr. Derbes too. So, as a historian, this is close to me, the history of my own family and the connection to the medical field. This just, it plays such an important role in documenting our history, preserving our history, and helping educate everyone, helping students and teachers and doctors and really everyone. As Heather said, some of you or perhaps your children may have interacted with the handbook in 7th grade history class, and we're a dynamic resource for that. And so we'll look at the handbook website here in just a moment. I'll share my screen with you and show you some of how you can search on there. But I certainly encourage you, as I'm talking, if you want to use a separate screen or separate tab or your phone to search the Handbook of Texas, please feel free to do so during the rest of the presentation here. So this project itself, it needs the support of doctors and healthcare workers, and it needs your attention. And we just want you to be aware that it's happening because Heather has done such a great job as project director in devoting time and attention to this project and making sure that that the entries are being assigned and that they're of a certain quality that are coming in, and then they go through certainly our processing over at the Texas State Historical Association. And so, I hope that you'll be interested in the project. I hope that you'll go to the website and look at it and maybe even consider joining TSHA if history of medicine is important to you, if Texas history in general is important to you, and we'll certainly show you how to do that. Heather did a great job in her presentation about talking about the history of UTMB with the Texas State Historical Association and with the handbook in particular, as far as helping us expand with those medical topics during that project in the 80s and early 90s. And so we view this as an extension of that effort. And another great institution that we've gone to collaborate with this project is the Texas Medical Association. We have a board member named Carlos Hamilton. He's a medical doctor, a retired medical doctor. And this was an important project to him, just the history of medicine in general. And so he helped gain support on our board and helped get us audience within the Texas Medical Association, specifically the History of Medicine Committee that was led by Dr. J. Marvin Smith. And so we had the opportunity to go there and present to their board of trustees, much like we're doing here today for you. And I can tell you that in that room, there was unanimous support for the project, and they were very excited, asking, engaging questions afterwards. And those of you that might be members of TMA that get Texas Medicine Magazine, you're going to see us in the January issue, and you're going to see us in some issues going forward. Every other month, they're going to feature an entry from the Handbook of Texas Medicine. So I think you'll be seeing us a little bit more here in this coming year. Let us know what you think about those when you see the entries. And so, of course, something that Heather already mentioned towards the end of her presentation, COVID-19, over this past year, it's pretty much impacted everything and everyone, and in a variety of ways. And it did impact our project as well. And all of our editors and authors are remote at this point. And of course, very early on, we wanted to put something out there in response to the pandemic and let people know with a history of medicine lens, the history of this sort of thing in Texas, plagues, pandemics, advancements in technology, things that relate to vaccines and therapy. So, we wanted to do what we could to present that information to everyone. And we got that ebook together. It has 19 handbook entries in there. And also, I forget how many, I think 9 articles from the Southwestern Historical Quarterly. So those are longer reads, but focused in on aspects of medicine in Texas. So I certainly hope you'll go and look at that, and I'll show you how to get there on the website as well here in a moment. So I think without further ado, I'll share my screen and take us over to the TSHA website. I think you're all seeing my screen now. So when you go to www.tshaonline.org, this is what you'll see. And we've been around, as it says, since 1897. We participate with all the other state history associations, and it's a big part of, like I said, preserving our history as a state, and then, tangentially as a country. So the Handbook of Texas is one of many things that we do, but it's one of the sort of the face of the association and how many people know us. And when you click on the Handbook of Texas, it'll take you to this screen. And here you can find much of what Heather talked about as far as the history of the handbook itself. This is the 6-volume set that we printed. We don't plan to print again. Within the encyclopedia community, even the Britannica is not going to be printing anymore. So many people have shifted away from that and digitized as we have. But if we were printing, we would have a whole nother volume by now, as far as everything that we've added since that came out. So here you can find out more about the project in general, and you can always get an accurate count of where we are. So we know that as of today, we have 27,235 entries, which is just incredible. We tend to add 150 to 200 a year. And you can see the various special projects here that Heather mentioned, and we'll look at certainly the Handbook of Texas Medicine, but I encourage you to look at any of those that interest you. And we have our ebooks that you can access, and we'll certainly show those to you as well. And the other information that you might want to know about the handbook if you were an author or if you wanted to contribute, and we'll tell you how to do that. So let's go specifically to the Handbook of Texas Medicine project. We recently put this information up here for everyone to look at. We have a fancy logo for the project that we want everyone to become familiar with. And this is where you can direct people if you want to give the sort of information that Heather's gone over and that I've gone over as far as UTMB's participation, the collaboration with TMA, and where we're headed with this. Again, we do plan to add hundreds of entries in this project. And not only that, we'll go and look at the 650 that exist and make sure that we're updating those where it's possible. Certainly some of the institutions have grown. Some of them have changed names. Some of them don't exist anymore. And there have certainly been many new institutions that have been added across the state since the last time we undertook an effort like this. So if you click that donate button at the top, this is the other page that it would take you to, and it talks again just briefly about the project and how you can contribute. And so again, if you are interested, as it says here, in volunteering to write entries, Heather and I definitely want to hear from you. And we don't want it to sound like just authoring entries. If you have topics that you think we should be on our radar, we definitely want to hear about those topics. For biographies, there's one caveat, which is that to have a dedicated biography, the individual has to be deceased. So certainly people that are alive are mentioned in the handbook. We talk about Mark Cuban owning the Mavericks, even though he isn't deceased. So in that way, we can mention people, but to have a dedicated biography, again, you have to be deceased. But let Heather know if you have topics, or certainly if you do want to contribute as an author. Some people are more comfortable researching, and we can put together teams of researchers and authors. So let us know if something like that interests you. And if you know anyone that wants to hear about this project, please let Heather and I know, because we want to scream it as loud as we can to everyone and make sure everyone knows this effort that's underway. The ebook that Heather talked about, you can reach on our website. Again, on the back here on the handbook page, if you scroll down here and click on ebooks, it's going to take you to the ebooks that are available. Heather previously in her presentation mentioned this one, the Texas Women in the Vote ebook that came out to celebrate that 100th anniversary. And so here is our one focused on Texas medicine. And again, it gives you a little bit of information. It tells you specifically the entries that we included in here, because again, we have 650 existing entries and a few more of the new ones that we've put on. And so it's dialed down to speak specifically to current events that we're all dealing with right now. And so if you go here and link to this, you will put in your email address, and then you'll get the ebook. So it's a way for you to engage with the TSHA and also get this sort of condensed introduction to the Handbook of Texas Medicine. You can share it with, it's great for students. It's great for really everyone. We don't necessarily just write to say the 7th grade level. Handbook entries are far wide and ranging in their terminology and in their complexity. So if we were to want to look at the Handbook of Texas, when you click on here, there's a number of ways. Again, there's an advanced search and a browse search. I would suggest the advanced search. You can certainly look for any keyword that you're looking for, whether it's epidemics or pandemics or a certain individual that you're looking for. But if you want to narrow it down to just the health and medicine topics, you can scroll down here on the left, and with this faceted search feature, which this is a new website for the TSHA and a new website for the handbook that we've been working on behind the scenes for years. And we just launched it this past summer. So it's very exciting for us. And there's a variety of new features, some of which I'm showing you right now, and some of which are forthcoming. But down here on the left, you can narrow it to just the health and medicine topics. And it says we have 656. There have been a few more new ones that have come on in the last week or so. You can really dial it down further from there if we wanted to. Well, certainly down here, you can limit it to the biographies or generals or overview entries. But then within health and medicine, it will present them in alphabetical order, and we could reduce it down to women in the health and medicine field. We could also reduce down to, let's say, a location, let's say in Dallas, Fort Worth. And so now it tells us that we have at least 8, yes. So so you can see you can toggle between and see within subcategories of the health and medicine category. If we were to click on one of these, it also tells you as you go through the entry. We obviously present these encyclopedic. Again, we grew from a printed encyclopedia with no images, and we've kept in that format over the years, even though we've gone digital. And so you'll have basic information in the introductory paragraph, and we try to include as many images as possible, which of course is something new since we went online, and sometimes those images can be difficult to find our way to, but we do our best. We're not as limited in the length of these entries as we once were. When we were a printed encyclopedia, there was a word count. You worried about every space, every word. We do try to keep these encyclopedic in style now, but we obviously let them expand to where the research is. There's so many more sources available now that some of these end up being nearly article length, and we try to keep control on that. If you scroll down to the bottom here, if you're interested in the sources from the entry, you can certainly grab those on the tab below. It'll tell you what categories that we've assigned to it. And this is something that the editors do behind the scenes to make sure that the browse feature works properly. If you want to use one of these in some of your research, there's a suggested citation. And if there are any images, it just lets you know where we get those images from. But this is one of the really cool new features at the bottom of every entry. If it's part of one of these special projects, like the Handbook of Texas Medicine, it'll be listed down here. So you can see this particular entry crosses 4 different special projects. And certainly if you click that, it takes you back to that page. And so we like to kind of keep people within a loop whenever they're on the handbook. We tend to see that people click between 7 to 10 times when they're within the handbook. So they go from entry to entry to entry, that sort of thing. I certainly wanted to show you an entry that we could look at that may be familiar to you. And so here we are. I could have just searched this if I went into the handbook search and put in Galveston National Laboratory. It would have pulled this up, and any other entries that mention the Galveston National Laboratory. And so this is an entry written by our project director, Heather. And we have some great images that have been added to this. I suggest all of you go take a read over this. Maybe you'll learn something that you weren't aware of with the Galveston Lab. And I think we even included one of the images off of here on the cover of our ebook. So we're definitely making sure that UTMB and Galveston has that representation for the project out there. Okay, let's go back to this search for the handbook and an advanced search, and within health and medicine again. Now, what we could do is narrow this within the subcategories that are prominent within the health and medicine category. So some of these I'm sure you would expect. You look over here, we have physicians and surgeons and general practitioners, medical schools. You can see just a variety of people who also have, work in other professions that are outside of the medical field, but they have some sort of life connection to that as well. So I encourage you to go through here and try to find things that interest you. If, as a historian, we tend to think in time periods, and I myself am a historian of Civil War history and prison history, and so I don't know that we have any medical topics that relate to prison history. I'll need to try to dial that in and find out. But as you can see with this project, those are the kind of topics that we want to consider. Heather and I, many times when we talk about the type of topics that we would like to assign, that we would like to see in the handbook, we like to think outside the box. And so, veterinary history, space medicine and technology related to the medical field. These sort of things that don't really, come to mind, I guess maybe at first when you think of traditional health and medicine topics, but those sorts of things. So we hope that this presentation might have you thinking about different topics that should be added. And I would say the first thing to do would be go to the handbook if you have a topic that interests you, and put it in the search and see if there is anything that relates to it, especially a biography for someone semi-famous. For instance, we recently added both DeBakey and Cooley to the handbook. And we consulted with Michael DeBakey's son. He reviewed the entry ahead of whenever the final version went online. So we really do try to get the best historians involved, the best researchers involved, the most appropriate people within the field. And then whenever we can, have another reviewer who comes along and that's very connected to the subject, and make sure that there's accuracy and that all of this information is vetted, and we're presenting the most complete picture to people that are researching the subject. And again, like Heather said, with the 1980s effort from the TSHA and with this effort right now with this project, we want to make sure that these entries are diverse and comprehensive and cover everyone's history, so that this is free and open to the public, and we want it to be useful to everyone who goes to the Handbook of Texas. So just to give you a little bit more granular update on where we're at with the project, as Heather said, we're right at about 100, maybe a little bit more than 100 that have been assigned. Of those 100 that have been assigned, 42 have been submitted, and 36 of those have been published online. So those are brand new entries that have just been researched and written, and are now available to everyone. And they're used within classrooms, within lesson plans, and things like that we connect teachers to as soon as these things go live. And we also push them on our social media. We have another 158 topics that are, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share, I think. We have another 158 topics that are available at this time. And certainly we want to hear from you to make sure that we add more. That you would think this should certainly be in the Handbook of Texas, and then you go there and it's not there for some reason. And we apologize about that, but we will do our best to make sure that we get it added. Right now we're giving away awards. This is actually the first year we're doing it, to the best handbook entries that are written. And there were 169 that were considered by our handbook committee. They've narrowed it to 22, and of that 22, I believe 5 are Handbook of Texas Medicine related. So you can see there's very strong representation there, and that's amongst all handbook entries that are written on all subjects. I mean, I know that we've had at least 6 that have just gone on here in the last week or two, which would account for the number difference earlier as far as the number of existing entries. And there's, to my knowledge, there's 4 that are on my research editor's desk right now, and they're biographies on military surgeons from the 1850s. So these are probably lesser known people, I would imagine, but they clearly have a story to tell. The research is being done, and I'll be excited to see what's there whenever they go online, and I hope you will be too. So I see we're, in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we have some time here to let a couple of our authors who have gone through this process, they've researched, they've written entries, and they've now contributed to this project. I want to give them a little bit of time to tell you about what they've done, how they came to that topic, and what it was like to kind of go through this whole process with Heather and with the project. So I'll turn the mic over.
Good afternoon. I'll start because I'm still not yet published, but I am amidst the process of, I'm immersed in a bunch of research and information, which is very interesting. I'm Margarita Ortiz. I'm a master's student at the IMH, and my background is not in history. My background is in law and, in fact, in immigration, but I've switched gears, and I can definitely attest that participation in authoring an entry for this project is an exercise in, well, definitely research and writing, right? And my understanding of it is, what means to me so much is that it's a multidimensional understanding. It's not a flat dimension. It's to give the historical lineage of an institution or an organization, and to really talk about purpose, echoing Dr. Wooten's explanation about the humanities having a big role in what we pairing that up with the hard science. It gives a different understanding, this multidimensional understanding of the intended purpose. And so, in a biographical, you're addressing the existence of a human being, a person or a thing that exists definitely in different dimensions. So it's a different type of research because it also has to be very objective. And so I think as a practical matter in this era of misinformation and misrepresentation, social media, it becomes imperative and an imperative skill to be able to fact check, to investigate valid resources, to have a resource such as this online. I'm a mother of 3, so for my children to be able to, they can't hold the Britannica anymore, but they can look at a very reliable source. So to be part of this bigger endeavor of getting the accurate information out there is, it's a big purpose, especially in today's world. So that, I value that. And it is really interesting, the type of connections that, and the type of runarounds you have to go through to get accurate information, to corroborate something, to make it a fact. Different than persuasive writing for sure. So, as students, as we are becoming grounded in this profession, which is heavily ingrained in this research process, it is important to have an HT-Med experience like this because we take part in investigative research. We have to be able to locate reliable sources of information, to have connections with, particularly in Galveston, with the Rosenberg Library and with the Daily News, and to see what stories are being published, to see what, I rely heavily for, with Dr. Burns's history and the Blocker collection. And so you get this all around idea. It's a discovery, right? No one is guiding you as much. You're managing how to interpret these resources and how to use them. And so it's a chase, and it's an adrenaline rush, actually, coming from a non-historian. And it's a mind exercise and organization, and see how to present this for publication, as well as, and I'm not here yet, but I'm pretty sure that there will be a lot of interaction with editors and seeing how this publication process works. So I am pretty sure that Carissa will illuminate us on that, since she has actually published some entries.
Thank you, Margarita. Yes, so everyone, I'm Carissa Rakestraw. I'm a PhD candidate in the IMH. And I have, see if I can think of it correctly, 3 publications with the Handbook of Texas Med, one in the pipeline. And one of mine on James Harlan Steele was actually selected to be in the ebook on epidemics as related to Texas, which is an opportunity that I probably would not have otherwise had it not been for being able to submit entries to this project. So in that regard, it's really neat to go through this as a student. But kind of personally, I've always been somebody who kind of grew up on the History Channel. And while I'm not a trained historian, it's just always been something I've enjoyed. So I welcomed the opportunity to engage with historical research, especially doing this as my first kind of introduction. And I chose things that were kind of out of the ballpark for me just slightly. So I did James Harlan Steele, as I mentioned. He was a veterinarian. I most certainly am not a veterinarian, but I am interested in animals and how we interact with animals, and being able to go back and research. I even had the opportunity to go to an archives up in the McGovern Archives in Houston and get in those archives where his whole collection was held. Look at these letters from presidents who are writing to him, greeting cards from the White House. That's probably the closest I'll ever get to the government at that level. But being able to physically touch these things and read them and read, letters to his wife and to his children really helps you understand, as Dr. Wooten mentioned earlier, the context behind these things. So I really got to see, yes, I'm never going to be able to completely shed my modern day perspective, but I could really step into those shoes of him and the others I researched, but really find out what the magnitude was of what they did. Because a lot of times what we do today as researchers, as students, as scholars, or just as lay people is we're focused on today and the future. So this is an exercise in going backwards and really seeing how going backwards really makes a big difference in today. Something we may take advantage of or is kind of commonplace, like the stethoscope, was a really big novel innovation back when it first came out and might have been met with a little bit of resistance, or who knows. So learning how to do, learning how these things happen and the impact that they still carry today, even if we don't see it as obvious, is just an incredible journey that as a student, as a researcher, and as a scholar, you can go on. And what's beautiful about the Handbook of Texas Medicine is you may be, let's say, a pediatric practicing physician. You don't have to only look at something that's pediatric related. I stepped out and did something with veterinarians. So it's really neat to be able to kind of jump into another field that's kind of related, but maybe you're just curious about it. You've always wondered how something happened. So it lets you do that and just really see. I know, especially with the COVID pandemic, a lot of people have been looking backwards to the 1918 pandemic. Well, had it not been for people putting in an effort to document that, we wouldn't be able to go back and learn and connect with them and know, oh my gosh, we have the same emotions to this and we can learn. And by being a part of the Handbook of Texas Medicine, yes, it's personally gratifying, professionally gratifying, but you're also a part of history in and of itself. You're making history by taking part in this. So I encourage everybody to do it. Both Dr. Derbes and Dr. Wooten are exceptional to work with, and they will help you through this process. They help me through it. So yeah, I would encourage you, and it's wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say that it's so exciting to hear how excited you were about going to the archives and doing that history detective work. We have everyone that writes for the handbook. We have lay historians, graduate students. We even let undergraduate students sometimes write biographies for us, and then all the way up to professionals and scholars and experts. And she's absolutely right that we're here to help and we're here to answer those questions. And I was just excited to hear your story. That was great.
What I want to also add is that for those of you in the audience who would like to give an entry a try, yes, we have physicians who have written for the handbook, as well as we said, many others, and including a lot of students who their graduate degrees in other universities are not history. But so I think what Margarita and Carissa have highlighted is the experience that you can get from that, and we are very eager to work with you. It is a process of which we will be with you. We can help you find topics, or you can certainly explore a topic of your own, and then we can certainly be with you in terms of there is a template of which you can use to write your entry. There's one for biographies. There's one for just about any genre you can think of. We have that template, so you at least have a place to start in terms of writing and crafting. Well, what is it that I need to know in order to put this story together? And then we can work with that in terms of fleshing out where to find those things. So before we get to the Q&A, I would just say, please feel free, if you're interested in this project in any way, whether it be coming up with just topic ideas for us to add to our list, or perhaps writing an entry, feel free to email me. I'm in the directory, but it's hgwooten@UTMB. Or you can also email Dr. Derbes. So with that, if Dr. Derbes doesn't have anything additional to add, I thought we could see if there's any question, if there's anything in the question and answer. I was answering a few of them earlier. If anyone has a question to ask, we have a few minutes in which to for you to add that to your box. Add that to the box. We'll respond.
And I would say, for some people, there may be some questions about, the editing and how that goes and what that process is like. And so, for us, our editors will certainly review your draft. If there's any rare sources that you used or difficult to obtain sources, we like for authors to scan those and give them to us so that our fact checking can go a little bit faster on the entry and the processing can go smooth. Typically, it'll take, we have a queue that exists of entries that have been turned into us that we're waiting to process. So it can take 3 to 4 months for an entry to go online. That's not uncommon. But that's still within any of you that have been within the publication field know that 3 to 4 months is pretty rapid in comparison to some other things. It can take a year for an article to go online, even longer for a book project. So that's one of the other great benefits of this is that what you do and what you turn into us will go online and be a publication in a short amount of time. So let me know if you have any questions related to the editing and the back and forth and that sort of thing.
I will also add, in terms of writing an entry, is individuals who have done so are always surprised at how much exposure they get for that entry, because the handbook is consulted so much for the very basic information. So your hits that you will get can often be a lot more extensive than the ones you might get for a full-throated article in a scholarly journal. You will get often a lot more for your handbook entry, a lot more exposure. So that's just kind of a fun thing to add.
I would definitely say if you go on to, say, Google Books and you put in the Handbook of Texas, we can't even count the number of citations that there are. There are thousands and thousands and thousands, and those are just the ones that are documented in Google Books. So whatever topic it is that you're writing on or that we produce in this project, anyone that comes after us that writes on that, whether it's an article or a book or some sort of movie or documentary project, they almost always find their way back to the Handbook of Texas entry because we're known for our reliability. And so it's a way to really get this information. We tend to think about it, I think, in terms of just scholars and education and people that are interested in literature and research and that kind of thing. But again, you reach out to more pop culture sort of things that reference medicine and that involve medicine, and this project is going to help inform that as well.
There are a couple of questions on the Q&A. Maybe read them out loud because I'm not sure everyone can see them if you want to respond to them.
So let's see, how do students register their interest in writing an entry, and who is the point of contact? I would say Heather and I, certainly Heather does the primary communications with any author, but I can help as well. And just let us know just that you're interested. And as Heather said, we have a bank of topics. So if you don't know what topic and you're okay with just being assigned one, we can do that. But then also if there's topics that you think of that should be considered, that process goes very quick with us. We consult amongst us and the chief historian, make sure that it meets a certain number of approvals, and then we just move forward with it.
And I would add to that, in terms of the topics, that I always have an ongoing list of all the topics that have been mentioned. So I'm happy to share that with any student who is just trying to think of what they might want to write about, and I can share that topic list with them as to what has been suggested so far that does not have an author. Brett, this one might be better for you. Have you been saturated with one topic more than other topics with regard to medicine?
I'd say not really. It seems to be pretty balanced what's coming in. Maybe it leans a little heavier towards biographies, and that's fine with us. Biographies tend to be more manageable research topics for people. It has a beginning, middle, and end, so to speak. And then you can certainly emphasize their connection with medicine. But with this project, I think there's going to be a lot of biographies, a lot of institutional history, and how they've changed over time, or just whole new hospital systems and things that are developed within the state. And then also just the general entries, that range. There's legal history is always one that's challenging for us to get within the handbook, and we'd love to have more of that, the crossover between legal and medical history. That's just kind of what comes to mind with that.
Another question is, has the research process been impacted by COVID-19, and does that change how you edit and fact-check entries? The
Yes.
process has been impacted. Yes.
Absolutely.
It has, because it has prevented individuals from being able to visit archives, or if you do go, the times you can go, or has been dwindled, has been limited. How you edit and fact check, Brett, you can probably say this. I would say probably not so much, but I'm gonna let you answer that.
Sure. Yeah, I would second what Heather said, that for a while, most libraries and archives were closed down. It seems like now more and more of them are trying to find a way to be open. I sort of joked with people for a little while. I said, no, don't close the archives. There's almost nowhere else you can socially distance other than an archive. Even before COVID, you go in there and there's only usually 2 or 3 people, and they kind of kept us 6 feet apart before. But it has certainly impacted people's ability to research, and that's improving now. On the editor side, we're still able to do what we need to do. We can contact the archivist directly. They're usually sending us digital copies of things that we need. And we have a variety of other ways that we get to the sources that we use for fact checking. And we have a number of assistant editors that are helping us process these entries now. So yeah, once you get it over to us, no worries, we will get it online.
Well, I believe that I answered, I typed in my answer to a few comments and questions, before we opened this up earlier, but we certainly appreciate all of the response that we've received. And again, we hope that you will enjoy exploring the handbook and reading the various articles at the very least, and then coming up with some ideas of directions you'd like to take, or incorporating that information in various ways. And again, yes, please, if you would like to, if you think of topics at any time, this is an ongoing project. There is no time limit to it. It is for the foreseeable future. So please do not hesitate. If a year downstream or so you come up with some topic that you find that would be interesting for the handbook, let us know. Or if you've come up with an idea that you might like to do, let us know. We're always open.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing today. It was a great talk. And as I said earlier, we're going to continue to have these talks the 2nd and the 4th Thursday of the month from 12 to noon. So please join us. And thank you, everyone. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.